The Earth, the Moon, the Sun, the Universe.
Well, is it possible that the Earth, the Moon, the Sun, as well as everything else in the universe, all came from a cosmic burp about millions of years ago? Or is it possible that it was all created from a higher power? Well, between the humanist view and the creation view, we're going to have a look at both sides. Let's check it out, shall we?
Okay, now every atheist, evolutionist, or just straight up non-believer will look at this world with a straight face and say that it came from nothing. They believe that man is God and we answer to no one. Now on the other hand, if you look at it from the other guy's point of view, you should be able to look at it and wonder who the creator was. You know, it's an incredible design, so there must be a designer. According to the creationist view, God is God, and he judges everyone. Now the way you tell which side is right, you have to look at the four great fundamental questions of life. Well, the first question would be, who am I? Well, if evolution is true, you're nothing important. Just a piece of worthless protoplasm that washed up on the shores of a beach millions of years ago. Actually, you'd be part of the problem because you're one of the polluters of the environment. People who believe this dumb idea want to reduce the world's population. That's a scary thought. Where did I come from? Well, if evolution is true, we all came from a cosmic burp millions of years ago. Why am I here? What's the purpose to life? If evolution is true, our existence is accidental and there is no purpose to life. So we may as well go out and have fun. If it feels good, do it. Where am I going when I die? If evolution is true, you go to the grave and eventually you're going to get recycled into something else and there's no afterlife. So once you're dead, you're dead. But the Bible says, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Now, if that's true, that will really turn those answers around. We will now take a look at the 6 different meanings of evolution in which only one of them has been observed. The first one happens to be cosmic evolution, you know, the origin of time, space, and matter, also known as what we all heard about in school, the Big Bang. Despite what you've heard about this ridiculous event, there is absolutely no evidence for the Big Bang at all. At all. Secondly, we would have to have chemical evolution, which is the origin of higher elements from hydrogen. If it were true, then how do we get all these different elements? They would have to evolve from hydrogenic helium, and no one's ever seen that happen. Third, we would have to have stellar evolution, which is the origin of how planets and stars formed. No one has ever seen those events happen. Fourthly, we would have to have organic evolution, which is when life starts from non-organic material. No one's ever seen that happen, and it's not possible. Fifthly, we would have to have macroevolution, which is when an animal changes from one kind of an animal to another. Could that really happen? Sure, in movies and fairy tales, but in reality, not a chance. No one's ever seen it happen. Last but not least, we got microevolution. Now, this is the one that's been observed. It shouldn't be called microevolution though, just a variation, but since they call it that, we're stuck with it. Now, we have just gone over the 6 different meanings of evolution. The only difference between these meanings, only this one has been observed. The rest are believed by faith. Unfortunately, I don't have time to go into detail about all these meanings in this video, so I'm just going to tackle one at a time. So first, I'm going to start with cosmic evolution and explain why the Big Bang is a fairy tale and why it never happened. The first thing to point out is that the Big Bang Theory is based on theoretical extremes. It may look good with math equations and calculations, but it can't actually happen that way. A tiny bit of nothing packed so tightly together that it blew up and produced all the matter in the universe. Seriously, that's a fairy tale. It's easy to make a theory out of something that's true when it's never actually been seen and there's no evidence that it exists or ever even happened. People, let's not mistake fantasy for science. The second point is that nothingness cannot pack itself together. It would have no way to push itself together simply because There's nothing to push together. You ask any atheist this, and they usually tell you that all the dirt got together and caused the explosion. Okay, so where'd all this dirt come from? Then they tell you that it came from abiogenesis. You ask them where that came from, and then they tell you it's from a singularity, and that we don't need to know where it came from to know that the Big Bang happened. Well, actually, yes, you would, in order to call it a fact. Because now, you're trying to create a fact out of fantasy. Evolutionists don't know where all this stuff came from, but yet they teach it in public schools like it's scientific facts. I'm sorry, but you can't say you don't know something for sure and teach it like it's facts. That's not science, and it don't work that way. You see, science is something we can test, study, and demonstrate. With evolution, you can't do any of those things. It's pure fantasy. Third point to make out. A vacuum has no density. It's said that the nothingness got very dense, and that's why it exploded. But a total vacuum is the opposite of total density. Think of it this way. The universe is a vacuum. Where then did matter and energy come from? Who placed the sun, moon, and the constellations of stars in the outer space? Other than God himself, something cannot come from nothing. The fourth point to make out. There would be no ignition to explode nothingness. No fire and no match. It couldn't be a chemical explosion. No chemicals existed. And it couldn't be a nuclear explosion because there were no atoms. Fifthly, there is no way to expand it. How can you expand what isn't there? Even if that magical vacuum could somehow be pulled together by gravity, what would then cause a pile of emptiness to push outward? The gravity, which brought it together, would keep it from expanding. 6. Nothingness cannot produce heat. The intense heat caused by the exploding nothingness is said to have changed the nothingness into protons, neutrons, and electrons. First, an empty vacuum in the extreme cold of outer space cannot get hot by itself. Second, an empty void cannot magically change itself into matter. And third, there can be no heat without an energy source. 7. The calculations are too exacting. Too perfect an explosion would be required. Knowledgeable scientists call them too perfect. Mathematical limitations would have to be met which would be next to impossible to achieve. The limits for success are simply too narrow. Most aspects of the theory are impossible, and some require parameters that would require miracles to fulfill. One example of this is the expansion of the original fireball from the Big Bang, which they place precisely within the narrowest of its limits. 8. Such an equation would have produced not a universe, but a whole. Roger L. St. Peter in 1974 developed a complicated mathematical equation that showed the theorized Big Bang could not have exploded outward into hydrogen and helium. In reality, St. Peter says the theoretical explosion, if one could possibly take place, would fall back on itself and make a theoretical black hole. This means that one imaginary object would swallow another one. 9. There is not enough antimatter in the universe. This is a big issue for the theorists. The original Big Bang would have produced equal amounts of positive matter and negative matter, but only small amounts of antimatter exist. There should be as much antimatter as matter, if the Big Bang was true. 10. The antimatter from the Big Bang would have destroyed all the regular matter. This fact is well known to physicists. As soon as the two are produced in a laboratory, they instantly come together and destroy one another.
Well, everyone, I'm out of time, so stay tuned for part 2.